Kia ora. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Rowan Panther. I live in the far north of Aotearoa, New Zealand, with my husband Louis and dog Lula. I was born in Auckland, and that's where I grew up, and now my family live in the Hawke's Bay. I consider myself to be a textile artist that makes pieces of adornment. I just want to thank everyone involved in making this happen, and a huge thank you to Creative New Zealand for providing the funding so I could take the time to make the work that I'm going to talk about. For those of you who are not familiar with my work, I use bobbin lace as a medium in which to explore my cultural background within the wider context of identity negotiation and the future possibilities of traditional craft. My work developed as a search into my own cultural identity, or really to fill a gap where my culture was supposed to be. Coming from a country filled both with a rich, full cultural social environment and a difficult colonial background, I didn't feel like there was anything out there that represented me, and I desperately wanted that. My tūpuna come from somewhere else. One common trait they all have was the courage and daring needed to set out into the unknown and try for a new life. However, I can't say this without acknowledging the pain some of this redistribution of people has caused with sovereignty and colonialism. Not only redistributing the people, but also the power and the control. My whakapapa originates from Ireland and the UK, Prussia and Samoa. It's an ever-evolving mixture. I like this idea of returning to my ancestors to find my strength, making pieces that look back to where I come from to inform where I could be in the future. Using the past to help me understand who I am. I've newly been introduced to the concept that we are all layered, our whakapapa who came before and those who will come after, all walking together. It has only been through showing my work and having conversations about it that I've truly realized how this sentiment resonates with so many other people. This idea of identity negotiation not being fixed, but fluid and changeable. For these pieces that were made for the show, a bone, an echo, a sign, I started back at the end of 2021. I knew I wanted to mix the concept of the tomi, a protective chest piece, with the European lace collar, and so just started looking at all the lace pattern books I had or could borrow. I feel inspired working with practices that are centuries old, that carry a wide, rich history of their own. Lace can be traced back in various applications centuries. I'm fascinated by tradition and a handing down of legacy. This is why I stick to established forms and patterns. I also had the opportunity to have a look at the collars held in the history collection at Te Papa, our national museum. I love books, but seeing the real thing is on a whole different level. I began looking at all these lace edgings, and the ones I kept being drawn towards were borders from a collection that had been taken out of the Lace Dealer's Pattern Guide. They incorporated gimp work to create stories within the lace. Gimp is a thick thread incorporated into the lace ground. The gimp was drawing outlines that spoke of the English countryside and elevated the everyday. I think during 20 and 21, with the lockdowns and travel restrictions, everyone was looking locally for inspiration, and I was excited about swapping out this classic English subject matter for something closer to home. Once I knew what I wanted to achieve, I started collecting samples of native plants in the rural surrounds of where I live, keeping the idea in mind of the patterns I would be substituting. Replacing oak leaves with kauri leaves, roses with kawa kawa, and a climbing vine with pohuahue, with the intention of making traditional arrangements that were more reflective of Aotearoa. It's a bit of a process looking at a sampler lace pattern and resizing and reinterpreting it. I prefer to use pencil and paper rather than relying on computer programs. Drawing them up myself gives me insight into how I'll proceed and where the tricky areas are hiding. I have a very systematic way of working. It's very process-based. You start at the beginning and work methodically through to the end with no surprises or changes. Lace is laborious. There are no shortcuts. Working primarily with Muka, a raw fibre processed from the native Harakeke plant, I connect the maker, object, and wearer to this whenua. Muka is the long filaments that run the length of the Harakeke leaves. Harakeke is commonly known as the New Zealand flax, although it is in fact completely unrelated to the European flax plant. The Harakeke plant and the fibre is integral to Māori practices and traditions and has been for many years. There are a lot of different varieties and each has a best purpose, whether it is for clothing, fishing nets, baskets, or kite, the list goes on. It even has medicinal benefits. Because the plant has such significance and symbolism, there are certain cultural protocols observed and followed when harvesting. Using an unorthodox material adds another layer of complexity. If I added sampling on top, the length of time to make one piece would be just too time-consuming. So instead, I rely on faith and planning. Because I keep the pins in until the last, I'm not guaranteed the end result is what I had in mind. You don't know for sure what you have until the end when the pins come out and you trim everything back and lift it up off the cushion, which is nerve-wracking, especially when you have deadlines and have put months in. All you can rely on is your skill and planning. The development of a piece of lace is slow. Worked in pairs, each movement is very disciplined and precise. As a material, the Muka demands respect. The transformative process from plant to fibre has an empowerment to it. You can't just roll more off the spool, so wastage is at a minimum. Being too rough causes breakage, and too delicate throws off the tension, so instead of using it, you have to work with it. You can make delicate open pieces that possess an inherent strength. Usually when making bobbin lace, you wind your thread around bobbins, so as your lace grows in size, you can unwind more thread. Muka does not lend itself to this method, so I have developed a way in working which is closer to weaving or braiding. The lace is where my true passion is, however, the hardware is a necessity in most pieces. The feeling of successful function is really important as well. I try to make well-considered pieces that don't look too clever and overcomplicated. On these three I'm showing you, I've paired the Muka with European beech, playing materials off against each other, the native and the imported, the indigenous and the foreign. Although I want to make pleasing, beautiful objects, I still want them to provoke thoughts, even if those thoughts can make us uncomfortable. The subject of time is reoccurring in my work, even if it's more of a product than a dedicated theme. My practice is underpinned by my level of personal investment, a means to display the dedication, not only the learning and practice needed to master traditional skills, but the time taken to conceive and construct individual objects. I would hope to think that when people look at what I do, they can see all the effort I've put in and feel a direct connection to my passion. I find it hard putting a monetary value on my work. The fibre for the main body being produced literally from my backyard does not have a quantifiable value. I do use precious metals such as silver, but as a functional addition that varies piece to piece. The material I use to convey my story costs me nothing. When I was putting this together, this is what I initially wrote, that my work costs me nothing. Then I pictured all the experiences I've missed, time with friends and family. I've turned down getting work ready for an exhibition or squeezing it in around and between paying jobs. The actual cost of working this way flashed through my mind. But I think we're always being reinformed about what we do. Even when you write your artist bio again and again and think you know what your work is about. I've always felt a little like when it comes to jewelry and adornment, nothing is more valuable than gold. This is on a more personal note, but my dad passed away in July. A total shock, he had a heart attack and he was here and then he wasn't anymore. And now I can see the true value of time. Now, 2 months on without my dad, I can see that something is more valuable than gold, time. And the time I put into my work is the greatest gift I can give. I see my practice as an opportunity, not only of recovery, but reimagining what this craft looks like from a New Zealand perspective, where we have no traditional lace practice. Engaging with native materials and imagery of significance, I aim to produce pieces representative of Aotearoa today. I consciously work together my Irish, English, Prussian and Samoan heritage. Although the lace patterns are loyal to traditional European designs, I produce wearable adornments that draw in forms and motifs from wider Moana Oceania cultural traditions. I reference the chest plates worn by chiefs and the lace collars worn by nobility to create a hybrid that lies somewhere in between, an entanglement of colonial narratives. By mixing my cultural lineages and referencing both the physical environment and the social context surrounding me, I can work towards preserving and innovating a craft largely forgotten.